Oh no, it's started
Pretty
yet.
live, yeah.
Now it's starting. Here we go.
Good thing I was here.
All right, we're live now.
Now that Ryan's what am I here for? Oh, it's getting real.
You're like my actual brain that like comes in and says, "No, you've done this wrong."
Here we go.
Oh, yeah. Let me know if anything goes wrong. What are you hearing?
solutions to their clients and to people with hearing difficulties as a choice and to help themselves. This includes different solutions, technology, different channels, and in particular today we're shining a spotlight on AI and how AI is disruptive but could also benefit us through its applications in hearing healthcare. So we have invited guest speakers today who will share with you their approaches to thinking about new solution and new innovation entrance into hearing healthcare, and will share some of their approaches currently in applying AI into hearing. So we have a jam-packed agenda today. We will hear from speakers first, according to the agenda that's on the events. And what we will do is save the questions to the panel discussion at the end. So as Soundbite's tradition, feel free to ask questions. If you're virtual, feel free to ask questions along the way. And our events team at the back will be moderating all the Q&A during the panel discussion. And during that time, we will have a roaming microphone to be passed around the room for anyone in the room who wants to join in on the Q&A. And today we have around 40-ish of you in person, maybe a bit more later, but online we have 270 registered attendants. And with that, I would like to thank GN Hearing, NAL Soundbites, the exec team who I saw before, don't know where they are now, and the events team who are sitting at the back to making today possible. Okay, some housekeeping first. So toilets are on the left side of the TV wall. If you walk into this alleyway, you will find the male and female toilet. Okay. Second is the room acoustics. It is important for us to use the microphone today and to have a working microphone before we start any presentation and before we talk, because the 270 people online relies on our inclusive behavior to engage with the event. The Wi-Fi is Macquarie Events, if you need it, password incubator lowercase 123. What else is there? I think that is it. So you would see the incubator sign to the right of the entrance, or directly in front of you right now if you look that way. That is where the canapé and the drinks will be served. If at any point you would like a drink of water or tea or something, the tea bar's right there. Feel free to go in between the presentations, please, to minimize the disturbance. Okay. Right, so with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker today, Dr. Andrew Deepburner. Andrew is currently the Chief Scientific Officer at GN, where he has worked in research for the past 20 years. Andrew, so currently, recent accomplishments in Andrew's team resulted in the release of the new binaural noise management system based on the augmented intelligence, so the Omnia and the Nexia products we know today, and the development of hearing protection prototypes that resulted in a new division in GN, Falcom, as well as prototypes using artificial intelligence for a personalized first fit in spatialized sound. And with that, please join me in welcoming Andrew to the stage.
Great, awesome. I always put a timer on because I kind of get excited about this topic because I'm like a nerd, and then I get caught up and go onto my own space and I forget people are around me. But I always have a timer to stop my talking. First off, it's great to come all the way down under, literally. it's always a long flight, but coming from Minnesota, I appreciate this nice weather, even though by Saturday I'll probably melt and disappear because it's getting pretty hot. So, and I just was texting with my wife and I saw a picture outside where there's some fresh snow on the ground. So I felt sorry for her as I was here. The topic that I'm going to be talking about is of real interest. Obviously, everyone's heard about GPT, and I guess I should probably see if this clicker works. It's a talk that I'm going to get myself oriented here because I like looking at the slides and talk to people. But it's a talk I've given to a number of audiences this year just because of what a relevant topic it is. Ironically, we've been working in machine learning probably since 2006. So to us, it isn't like cutting edge. It's just we're starting to find ways to get into products, and it's really matured this field. And I think there's like really exciting opportunities for audiologists and hearing care professionals on what you can do for your patients and how you can really personalize their listening experience for them. So I know there's uncertainty in this area because there's a lot of unknowns, and hopefully we can start opening up your eyes and the door to what we're planning to do in some of these areas and give you a couple of use cases just to think about. Our topic is the top part is really simple, and then as a scientist we have to add more complex words underneath because we're also talking to some of our colleagues who need a little more scientific words to our sentence. But at the end of my talk, I am hoping that you'll understand at least what we do in GN Advanced Science, how we apply artificial intelligence, how we use actually the human as inspiration, because actually the human brain is a supercomputer. And it still amazes me every time I study and learn more about how we think and how we hear and how we can take technologies and integrate them in a kind of synergistic way. And that's where that neuromorphic term comes from, taking technology and integrating it with a biological system. So I have 30 minutes and I could probably talk 30 minutes on topic one, but I'm just going to run through a couple of topics just to give some use cases on artificial intelligence and where we're going with it. We'll talk a little bit about decision making in hearing aids, the noise management in hearing aids, how we can improve the communication experience because people use cell phones, listen to, use a spouse mic, somebody else talking, or TV stream. And so mixed reality is becoming a really big topic. And then the last thing, of course, is that, your patients are investing some money and time, their time in the products and the solutions, the interventions that we provide for them. So how can we help them along and really to maximize and get the full benefit from this? And this is where artificial intelligence will actually play a good role in. I always make a note, we spent about a decade trying to look at hearing aids and try to make them transparent. Because a lot of hearing aids, you put them in back in, we'd say in the 2000s, and it sounded almost like a Star Wars episode. There's so many changes moving on, and noise management would kick on and something would switch. And some of it was actually done somewhat intentionally so people would hear that you just got this turned on and this is great. But the reality is most people want to put something in their ears and have a natural experience. And there's a lot that goes behind getting a natural experience when you put something in your ears and plug up your ears. You have occlusion effect, you have feedback, you have all these other things that are getting introduced. So if you don't get this right, then it doesn't matter with AI, right? I mean, you first have to start off with a good foundation, what we call transparent hearing, something that you put in the ear and you don't even know it's there. And it just is part of what you're used to listening to. A second thing just to point out is we use the term artificial intelligence. You're going to hear the term machine learning. You're going to hear the term intelligent agent. These are subsets of the same thing. It's just, machine learning I look at as advanced statistics. Artificial intelligence is creating a system that has sense, comprehend, and act components to it. So it's a system that actually can analyze and make decisions and act on those decisions. And then these intelligent agents are kind of what's referred to as, these intelligent systems are kind of encapsulated by intelligent agent that has a specific function that system has a specific function, what it does. And you're probably familiar with intelligent agents because you probably get them when you try to talk, like I did this weekend, to the airline when they cancel your flight and they put you on this intelligent agent for your first 5 minutes. You're like, I need an agent, a real agent, you know, and you finally get through to them. I also like to look at, you know, I don't know if you know this, but GN is a company that not only focuses on the hearing health, but we also make audio products. We're in SteelSeries gaming, hearing protection. So and video. And so we really look at communication across the spectrum. And, you know, for the longest time, I've been spending all my career doing a lot of work in hearing aids, trying to get hearing aids to a point where it's a wheelchair or crutch. But we're getting to a point now where our hearing aids are getting better and better, to a point now we're in the 20s where we really believe that not only can we try to provide some restoration, but we actually can provide enhancement. And this enhancement is actually not just for hearing impaired people, but it's for people with situational hearing loss who have normal hearing. And all of us experience situational hearing loss. You go into a noisy place, you're trying to talk to a friend, you have to lean in and really start paying attention. You start experiencing listening fatigue, so it takes some effort. You don't need hearing loss to experience that. And some of these methodologies, especially when we start introducing some of the things we do in AI, are going to open up the doors where we can really actually provide what I call like an electric bike, where if I don't know how big electric bikes are here in Australia, but in Europe, they're kind of a big deal. And you know, it's always amazing when you're like on a regular bike trying to go up this hill, and then someone 80 years old is just pedaling along like it's nothing. And you're like, how is that even possible? You know, and you realize its electric bike is kicked in and it just frees them. They can go places that they normally couldn't go before. And that's the way I look at why our research strategy, we call it cyber hearing, because we really believe that we're at a point where we can actually allow people to hear in places that they normally couldn't hear with their impairment. And we want to free them up to go back to the days when you know, some of these tasks aren't as difficult to do like they were when they were younger. Artificial intelligence and human intelligence, I'm going to push this point along the way. Our philosophy in GN, and I've really pushed this for years, is, you know, it's amazing what technology can do, but we're combining technology with the human. And we have to always put the human at the front, and then you combine technology on top. And the example I always give is if I were to build an exoskeleton for you, and I don't know if you've ever seen some of the latest exoskeletons they build. I think it's big research in military, like DARPA labs and places like that. They're doing that work. But just imagine if you put an outfit that would help you like lift rocks to do yard work, and it just gave you the strength to be able to move these boulders. That's awesome. But imagine if you had to use an app to move your legs in this exoskeleton, right? I mean, that would just be such a pain in the butt to do that. So you can either build a robot to move the rocks, which then you get no enjoyment. It's like having an electric bike that bikes by itself. Yeah, it can do that. But then there's no human on top of it. They don't enjoy it. Or you can integrate the human in the center of your design and then build a technology around it. And, you know, there's, you know, again, we have to remember the human brain is a supercomputer. I mean, we're still trying to match it, and we need a lot of resources to match it. And it has 5 senses that it can use, and it does 11 million bits per second. If I were to give you the technical specs, and this is of course just all estimates, but give you technical specs, and I said that's a hearing aid, you'd be like, holy crap, this is unbelievable. We already have that. Now we just use technology over here, and we build on top of what we have, and then we're able to actually unlock a lot more interesting solutions to the problem because we do have this system. So anyway, I sometimes do a comparison between competition and GN. It's really important for us that we work with what we call not intelligent artificial intelligence, but what we call augmented intelligence, which is the combination of the human mind with artificial intelligence and working together. Machines can do certain things better than humans. Use that. But humans can do things better than machines. Use that, and then figure out as a system together how they work together. Just kind of a breakdown of how we're looking at our systems within GN and how we're kind of getting this to function. We have a system that, you know, if you look at an intelligent system, it can be broken down into sense, comprehend, and act. And if you superimpose the human with the machine together, obviously the human has senses and the machine should have senses, but we have to get these two talking, you know. So you think of the exoskeleton. If I want to move, the exoskeleton should be able to sense which way I want to move and then react to it and move along in simultaneously. So anyway, you know, you need to have sense, and then you have to understand and comprehend, and then act. You know, you have to do some action on what you did. An example from this could be the machine hears me talking with somebody else and says, oh, this person is engaged in a one-on-one. So it sensed that there's a voice. It comprehended the situation that I'm actually engaged in the communication. And so it's comprehending what's going on and how I'm using it. And then it says, you know, I notice that person is always saying what or huh or leaning forward more. And it says, okay, right now we understand that there's some difficulty communicating in this scenario. So let's act. Let's put on a beamformer and maybe improve the signal to noise ratio. Let's do something else like digital noise reduction and apply that. And so what you get is a nice, very synergistic system built together. And really trying to get kind of a listening experience that is enhanced and that it works together. And right now, if you look at hearing aids, they're usually program 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? Or something like that. And so why do we have programs 1, 2, 3, and 4? Because our hearing aid isn't intelligent enough to understand what a person wants, right? So you basically say to the user, all right, if you're in this environment, press 1, or if you're in that environment, press 2. I predict that, you know, we won't have programs anymore in the future. If we do, it'll probably be more about what do you want out of your hearing aid? What would you like? What is the most important thing to you? Is it telephone communication because you're a business person? Is it you enjoy having dinners and you want to have the best experience there? And we start developing our hearing aids to actually react to your personalized scenes, and how can we improve on that? And how does the hearing instrument recognize that? And we get rid of you know, some of our fail safes like programs from our systems. Another topic that I talk about is neuromorphics. Elon Musk has a company, or has invested in a company, where you hear about neuromorphics with the chip being implanted in your head and how we can add memory to your memory, right? That's a bit intrusive for me. I don't know if I'd want to be the first one on the docket to get something implanted inside me. But it is an interesting space, and we actually are part of a project where we were looking at the machine learning language that we're developing, and we were trying to compare it to how, you know, if we were to train a neural network, artificial network that kind of mimics the brain, could we actually train neurons to play Pong? And I don't know if anyone knows what Pong is anymore, because that's an older video game. That was a game where you just kind of move this block and watch this ball bounce up and down, and just had to do that. And so they're actually showing how the language that we use can train actually neurons to play Pong. And so it shows you how close we're getting in terms of training, even the language that we've chosen for machine learning, how it's starting to replicate how our brain is actually functioning. But anyway, we don't work intrusively, we work non-intrusively, which just means that we don't actually have to implant it. We just put it and we manipulate the sound stream, and we're able to actually do things to change the sound stream, to get the brain involved, to enhance something, or to utilize a function in the brain to do a particular output for us. And so we can work non-intrusively. But at the end of the day, you know, at least this is, you know, Jan's philosophy on how we're integrating artificial intelligence into our product lines. You know, we need to understand the environment you're in, and we have to understand what the listening intent of that environment is. So the first one, the acoustic scene, is from the perspective of the machine. The second part is the machine has to understand then how the human wants to interact in this environment. So do I want to listen, you know, to Brent over there, who's complaining about how hot it is, or do I want to, you know, listen to Andreas on something more interesting about rugby or something like that, right? So, you know, actually the hearing instrument itself has to actually decipher this, and has to make sure it interprets it right. So we have to kind of, again, find ways to connect the human and the machine together. And then the third thing is, then we have to say, what type of action do we do? Now, we know the human brain it processes sound. It does things, right? We're not asking the machine to process sound for us, and then we get this amazing perception. The machine is going to do some changes to sound, and our brain is going to use those changes. So what can we do collectively? What will the human brain do? We have two channels going into your ear. What can we get happening between those two ears, and what can get happening between the two instruments? And then how do we merge this into a system? And that's what we call this non-intrusive neuromorphic technology. This is using augmented intelligence, using machine learning integrated into our systems. We're able to connect the machine and the human together into the world in order to operate. And that's just kind of more of the technical overview and journey of artificial intelligence. When you get into kind of the practical things, which now make a little more sense for a clinician in their office, we'll take something like scene analysis. And, you know, I mean, obviously we have classifiers in our hearing aids, you know, but classifiers only go so far. They tell you there's noise present. They tell you there's speech present. They don't tell you what speech is present. Is it so-and-so over here or so-and-so over there? So we're getting to a point where we're doing more object-oriented identification. So there's speech present and there's two talkers, and the talker is in front of you and another talker is beside you. It appears that you're talking in the direction to the talker in front of you. So this is important. And how do we actually analyze and map this out with our hearing instruments? And then, you know, figure out, you know, how in the brain, how do we actually, what are you attending to? What are you listening to? You know, what are you hearing? And, you know, of course, there's been a lot of research with EEGs, which is a little bit more difficult to try to capture from the 8th cranial nerve, whatever neural signal you can. Maybe capture more complex centers in the auditory system. But that by itself is quite a difficult area just to, you know, be able to depend on that alone. But there is other biometric sensors that you can work with to start learning about listener intent. And this is where a lot of the research is now focused on. And you'll see a lot of push-in products. You're going to see a lot more different and unique things coming to really pull this together, where the machine has to understand what's happening around it and what the listener intent is for this particular effort. Another thing too is, as you know, and again, we're talking futuristic here, but you know, it's amazing how quick things change. Right now, the hearing instrument has one sense, sound, right? It could get other senses that we put in, because some people have accelerometers, so we can start getting head positioning, things like that also in play, so another sense. But there's also vision. You know, it isn't unforeseeable to start thinking that cameras are getting smaller and smaller and will maybe be integrated in the future. If you start getting cameras integrated, then all of a sudden you give the hearing instrument sight and sound. And as you can tell, as you've already seen with Apple and other big companies, they're starting to master the art of image recognition, object recognition, things like that. You know, so now, not to say there isn't regulatory issues with putting cameras on people's hearing aids. Obviously, there's a lot in this field that's new that will be challenged by when it comes to regulations. But there is an opportunity to put multiple senses on your hearing aids and being able to depict, you know, what objects exist around you. And that you don't just have to do acoustic recognition. You could do visual recognition or use heat sensors or other types of interesting physics that exist in the environment. So the machine starts sensing what's going on around it. And then, of course, we have to make sure that we connect into how the brain is thinking, how a person wants to listen to, and that's more of the biometric sensors that you have to start looking into. And of course, the most commonly discussed is EEG as an example. A second use case, and this is becoming more and more prevalent. You see this, especially big companies like NVIDIA, giving great examples of what type of noise reduction you can actually apply. Now, the advantage that NVIDIA has is it has processing power, right? I mean, we don't have any NVIDIA chips in hearing aids, and there isn't anything in the near future that's going to come in hearing aid chipset that we plug in this big, you know, chip on the side with a fan on it and heatsink. So, you know, what we have to do is we have to take their learnings and apply it in an arena where we have limited kind of processing power. We just have smaller computers that can do less. But this is becoming quite interesting, because the trick, you know, when it comes into intelligent noise reduction, when it comes to using like a DNN DNR approach, DNN being a neural network a deep neural network, is that you can actually train for your system to recognize the speech signal and eliminate everything and just kind of recreate that speech signal, you know. So basically, start with a clean slate and just recreate the signal that you want and eliminate everything else, you know. And, you know, that's quite appealing because then theoretically you can get unlimited SNR, right? You know, I mean, you could eliminate all sounds if you want. Now, in reality, we don't want to feel like we're in an anechoic chamber just talking to one person when there's like music around and, you know, atmosphere and room reflections. So it isn't quite that simple when it comes to how we want to apply it in the real world. But, you know, that's kind of one of the exciting things. So just a quick picture. I mean, if you take a look at, some of you have seen spectrograms before, and you look at all the noise that's embedded, or if you look at a time wave picture of it, what it looks like, and then you're able to actually you know, process this and clean it up and get a really clean, not only a clean speech signal, but you theoretically could get an enhanced speech signal, meaning, I don't know if anyone is familiar with, there's a study at MIT, I think it was called Clear Speech. I'm trying to remember that study, but basically what they did is they wanted to look at speech when you wanted people to really understand what you said, what was the most clearest interpretable way of saying it, you know. And so they had different people talking in different ways, and they found out, you know, a certain way that you could speak that was rated the clearest way of speaking, and then they analyzed it acoustically to see, you know, what was different from, let's say, how other people were talking. You know, sometimes as a Canadian, I start rushing my words, and then, you know, I know, you know, when you're talking about Australian accent, we have different ways of saying things, and then you're like, what the heck is that guy saying? And then if I say it a few more times, you understand it. Just the same way as someone was telling me that they had a tics book, and I'm like, what the heck is that? And I just didn't know what it was, and it's a textbook. All right. So there's ways that you could actually, I wouldn't say you want to get rid of accents, but there's ways that you could make them more understandable and still retain kind of the origin of the person where they learned their language from. And so that's something that actually is even available on how you train these neural networks. And then I won't get into too many examples here, just because you know, I have about 7 minutes left here. But we've you know, built many models trying to get it to work, you know, on kind of the constraints of our systems. And our goal in research is to keep on asking for more processing capability from our hearing aid, and then that reduces all your battery power. So then pretty soon you're giving your patient 16 hours straight to 3 hours straight. They're like, well, that won't work. And that's our game. We just have to continue to work and play with how much a person actually wants to wear their hearing aids, and how much they have to recharge them, and what we can do. And it's just this game of processing and things like that. But anyway, this is, you know, just a simple system that we've tried out and applied as an example in a hearing instrument. Auditory enhancement is a third area that we're interested in. And this one, we put a lot of research work into, and there's some fundamental things we had to do. In one of our products, we have something called a Marie form factor, which was a mic in the ear. The reason why we designed a mic in the ear was really basically, we realized that we were missing information on how our ears filter sound for the human when they're in an environment. And this filtered sound, which we took the mics and put above the ears, we lost all this filtering, natural filtering. And we realized, well, this is quite detrimental with tasks like spatialization, be able to segregate and sort of separate sounds. See if I can use the pointer. It's green, but it doesn't show very well. But anyway, it shows down here really well, but it doesn't help. But if you were to take a look at a sentence that wasn't basically spatialized, if I just give you this sentence, you basically have to look at this entire sentence. And so you have to focus on, these are two sentences, and they're not spatially separate. They're basically superimposed, and you struggle with it. But the moment I break up the two sentences, you're going to focus on one and the other, and you're going to be able to read it. And you can already see that your attention spotlight got reduced and shifted on the information that's relevant. if we continue to provide and mess up information in our hearing instruments, we're going to fatigue our patients out really quickly, because we're making them do all this extra work, and we just negated some function from the human brain that actually works quite well. And so anyway, one of the things that we can really do is continue to spotlight and provide spatial information. When you get into noise reduction, our beamformers start reducing some of the spatial information. So you want to integrate spatial information for your beamformers, you want to integrate spatial information for your phone calls. There's many places that you can really provide this. And so the Marie was to us the start of a journey, and where we go with it is we want to continue to explore and build off this knowledge so that we can create listening situations that allow you to use less and less neurons to focus on the object you want to, and not have to expand your spotlight to focus on a lot of other information, just because we're not doing simple things like allowing the brain to sort of separate two speakers that are in two different locations. You know, some of the challenges we have obviously is that, yeah, we have a mic in the ear, but there's certain times where we would like to, you know, really understand a little bit more about your pinna, so we can actually include that in the design, in our designs, especially when it comes to sounds that are virtual, as an example. And so a lot of work has been done where we can do pattern recognition of ears and start matching those ears to you know, to known HRTFs, to a database RTFs, or even actually start constructing an HRTF based on patterns and based on the data we collect in the field. You know, again, sounds are being picked up by our hearing instrument. We know what direction it comes from. We can actually determine the filtering characteristics of those sounds. And then if we have an image of the ear, we start associating that data to that image, and start continuing to build up a database that allows us to be able to very quickly approximate, let's say, an individualized HRTF as an example. And then the last thing, which is kind of really cool, and I think is going to have, it'll be interesting to see what it has, what effect it has on our patients, is right now we've dealt with you know, glasses. We've looked at glasses to help your eyesight, but you know, now we're getting to a point where we're starting to play with holograms, right? On cars, you see the speedometer holographically. There's information you put out. Why not start using this more with our hearing aids? There's, you know, I know even people who don't have hearing loss who use captioning on movies, and they'll you know, they'll play the sound loud enough so they get the emotion of the sounds, and then have the captioning on so they get the intelligibility of the speech that's going on, so they can actually get that. So using other sensors is really exciting. I even seen research where you use haptics to help interpret sounds or directions that sounds come from. So we're going to see a lot more different types of multi-sensory inputs. All of this is going to have a huge impact on you know, what parts of the brain we use when we start manipulating and really start using this supercomputer to our advantage. And then the very final thing I'll mention, because I have 2 minutes left, is the self-management part of it. You know, when you put hearing aids on, do they fit properly? You know, do you have the right length of tube? All these simple things that really make or break it, you know. And we started doing research because of this over-the-counter initiative in the US where we have to sell these OTCs. But we realized as we were doing some of this and trying to help people self-fit, that there's all sorts of really interesting tools that we're starting to be realized that could help an HCP, whether it's in office or in a telehealth setting, to really optimize kind of the fitting of the hearing instrument on the ear. You know, that's something that I think is going to be really interesting to see how we can get better self-care, self-management, telehealth management put together, so that we don't always have patients to come in just because their hearing aids, they don't fit well. We can actually do this maybe offline or real time, or maybe set the patient up if they're really smart to you know, do it themselves. So anyway, this was a very quick in a nutshell talk. I hope you got something from this that was interesting, and feel free, notice there's a bar there, but feel free afterwards to enjoy a drink and have some talks if you want to talk about something that sparked your interest. But again, thanks for the time here. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Andrew. So as we set up and exchange the microphones, I have the opportunity to tell you about our next speaker, Dr. Brent Edwards. He is the director of NAL, and he joined NAL in 2017. And prior to that, for over 22 years, he headed research at major hearing aid companies, GN Resound, Starkey, and at Silicon Valley startups that have developed innovative technology and clinical tools that are used worldwide. Dr. Edwards founded and ran the Starkey Hearing Research Center in Berkeley and has published extensively in peer-reviewed journals and is a frequently invited speaker at international scientific conferences. In fact, I think he just came back from one of them over this week. And so with that, please join me in welcoming Dr. Brent Edwards.
Yeah. It might be muted just to double check. Sorry.
Testing. Yeah, cool. All right. So thanks everyone. Apparently, according to Andrew, I'm here to complain about the hot temperature. So I've got 10 minutes to do that. And I do recommend that you have a drink before I give my talk, because it'll be much more enjoyable. But your own risk if you don't. So I'm going to take sort of elevate the discussion a little bit and get out of, that was a terrific talk, by the way, and get out of the details and talk a little bit more about what's going on generally in hearing healthcare, in AI, but other technology as well. So probably for most of the past half century, probably longer, hearing healthcare has been very consistent in how it's been delivered. Someone who typically is older shows up at a hearing clinic, talks to an audiologist, gets some classic audiometric diagnostics done, and then if it seems that they're appropriate, they get recommended a hearing aid. And that's rinse and repeat for every single person who has had hearing difficulty for the past at least half century. So that over the past decade has started to change quite dramatically. And now almost every year, if not every month, we're seeing changes in how this works. And so, you know, over the years, when I've talked about the future of our field, I got a lot of questions, things like, well, are hearables going to replace audiology? Is telehealth going to replace, you know, the clinic? Questions that I thought were a little bit off track, that the changes that were happening so quickly that things were getting confused, that maybe were separate issues. So I worked with Sophie Bryce, Elaine Saunders a couple of years ago to come up with a framework to think about all the changes that are happening in hearing healthcare. And for those of you who don't know, Elaine Saunders is the founder and was owner of Blamey Saunders Hears, who did a lot of innovation in these three domains. And Sophie Bryce was an employee there at the time, and she's now a professor down in Tasmania. So looking at all the changes that were happening, we kind of concluded that this framework is a great way to think about new entrants into our field of hearing healthcare, but also give us a way to explore what's missing and what are the opportunities for new innovation in hearing healthcare. So traditionally, so you think about three different domains that everything falls in, and you could either be very clinical in how it's applied or very consumer oriented in how it's applied, or in the middle. So that model that I described for the past half decade, everything has been sort of on the far left. Medical grade hearing aids provided by, you know, medically certified audiologists in a hearing healthcare clinic or a hospital. So all very clinically focused. Now we're starting to see these dials or levers shift back and forth with different solutions coming out. So probably the first one on that started to shift the dials here was teleaudiology, where we are starting to see the services or these apps that the user can have with the hearing aids, where people can start to take care of things on their own. So they didn't necessarily need the audiologist all the time in order to make adjustments to the hearing aid, or with asynchronous teleaudiology, they could send a complaint to the audiologist, and the audiologist could remotely make the changes. So that's starting to leak over into the consumer side in terms of how hearing healthcare services were being provided. But consider over-the-counter hearing aids, which in the US has been a big topic for several years, not so much in Australia and other countries yet. But what is happening with direct-to-consumer over-the-counter hearing aids, we're seeing Sennheiser teaming up with hearing aid company. We're seeing Sony teaming up with a hearing aid company. Jabra, of course, already apart, but coming up with more consumer-focused products. And here's a photo I took earlier this year of a hearing aid being sold in Costco, right beside Fitbits and right beside laptops and headphones and other things in the consumer electronics section. So right away, we're seeing that OTC hearing aids are probably, initially at least, falling in this way. They're still medical products, but they're being delivered in a consumer channel, and there are no professional services being provided. So that's the introduction of OTC. But does that mean that it can't be changed? There aren't other ways that OTC hearing aids can be provided in hearing healthcare. For example, you could have an OTC hearing aid being sold through a consumer channel, but then have subsequent follow-up services provided by an audiologist. In fact, this is what Costco is doing right now. If someone buys their OTC hearing aid in their warehouse and they have a problem, they can go back to the audiologists who work in that store and get help with their OTC hearing aid. So just because a product falls in one domain doesn't mean you can't play with the dials and come up with different business models and solutions for people, in part because different people have different needs. So everyone wants services, everyone wants hearing healthcare delivered in a little bit of a different way. And this starts to explain all the ways that we can provide solutions for the marketplace out there. But even the channel, OTC hearing aids don't have to be delivered in a consumer channel. They can still be delivered in a hearing healthcare environment. In fact, I knew someone back in the US who was very successful who was a very successful audiology practice, but when they had a consumer, client or patient who didn't want traditional hearing aids and didn't want the audiological services, he would say, well, I had these hearing aids that are $300, they're preset, you're not going to get any help from an audiologist, but they can still give you some help, basically OTC. Do you want some? Yes, there were people out there who wanted it. So that was in an audiology clinic, no services at all, but a traditional hearing aid being provided to them. So you can start to play with the dials and come up with different solutions and new innovation to provide in the world of hearing healthcare for those who want help. Now, NAL Guide, for some of you who may not be aware of what NAL Guide is, it's a tool. It's not a technology, but I'll still sort of put it up there as a tool that is there in order to innovate for the person with hearing loss. So we developed it as it's a way of explaining to the average person what technology does and what benefits it provides. And here's an example of a couple pages where you take something very complicated like remote wireless microphones and you explain in a very consumer-friendly way what it is. Now, we developed this for everything on the right-hand side. So it's a non-clinical tool that is provided on a website, either right now the Department of Health website in Australia or our NAL's website. And it's for the consumer to use and consume themselves. There's no professional involved in the delivery of that information. But why does it have to sit only there? Could there be another way that it could add value to hearing healthcare if we start to move the dial? So what we did is we took these two dials and moved them over to this side. And what we're finding now here in Australia and around the world, that audiologists are using NAL Guide as a part of the services that they're delivering in the clinic when they're having conversations with their patient or client. So same product, but being delivered in a completely different way by thinking about how can we change the way we provide this service within the field of hearing healthcare. And then one challenge to the team who has developed this, who are in the room right now, what would happen if we move that dial this way? How could we do that and still deliver value to people in the world of hearing healthcare? We haven't had that discussion. But when you think about hearing healthcare within this framework, it allows you to ask those questions and come up with new inventions and new innovations. Now, there's a lot of technology out there that is for hearing help, but are not traditional hearing aids. There are hearables, AirPods, there are apps, there's, something for computers and iPads and so on. So where does that fit? Well, all of these are consumer products, again, delivered in the consumer channels and without professional involved. But why does it have to sit there? Why do AirPods have to only be sold in Apple stores and Best Buy and JB Hi-Fi? Why can't they be in hearing healthcare clinics when they can actually be programmed to provide help for people with hearing loss? And with the help of an audiologist who maybe that 75, 80-year-old doesn't quite know how to set it up for hearing healthcare, and they can guide them. And this is one of the reasons why we have talked about the embedding some of this within hearing healthcare clinics. This is a tool for people who are on things like Zoom and Teams that helps with hearing loss. As a professional, why wouldn't we talk about this for people who are having problems on video conferencing as part of the solutions that the professional is providing? It doesn't all have to sit on the consumer side. We can move those dials and bring some of those consumer technologies into the professional clinical channel. And in order to help with this, we actually created a video to guide people on how do you set up AirPods as a hearing aid or for hearing help. Because it's not easy, but it's a way to help people understand how they can use AirPods to help their clients and patients with hearing loss. And we're seeing that happen right now. So we heard a lot about artificial intelligence. What does this framework have to do with that? Well, for me, it's a big question. Where is AI going to be applied? I think we heard from Andrew mostly stuff on this side because he works in a hearing aid company and that's the focus of their business. But I think we're going to be seeing AI applied all over the place. Consumer products, self-help, professional help, at home, in the clinic. And you're going to see some demos later on of stuff that we're doing at NAL that sort of fall all over the place here on this map. So AI is going to help in many ways, both professionally, clinically, but also in the consumer side with also this mix and match approach. So finally, I thought we should finish by asking ChatGPT where it thinks AI is going to land in hearing healthcare. This is actually an interview that Carrie Recker, audiology research in the US, had with ChatGPT earlier this year. But it was quite insightful to see what ChatGPT thought about the application of AI in audiology. So these are direct quotes from ChatGPT, by the way. AI tools can be used to assist audiologists in the diagnostics and counseling and treatment. It can be used to monitor how patients are doing and track their hearing over time, detect changes so that they can go back to the professional. It can be used to analyze data and help make predictions on what that client in front of you needs based on past history and other people who have come through the system. And it can also be used to automate some of the simple tasks that the audiologist is spending time on, but they could now free up by having AI do some of the simple tasks that you don't really need a trained audiologist to do. Hello audiogram. You don't need a 4-year trained or 2-year trained audiologist to do that. Why not have an AI system do it and really help be more efficient and effective in delivering hearing healthcare? So my main point here is including AI, but think about everything that's happening in a spectrum, and that you can disambiguate technology development from the services that professionals are providing and the way in which it's being delivered. And it's really a mix and match. It's not one or the other, but we're going to end up with a world where hearing healthcare falls across all of these. One isn't going to replace the other, but it's going to be up to the person with hearing healthcare. Which solution do they want? And as a field, we are starting to provide all of these different solutions. And at least for me and Elaine and Sophie, when we started thinking about this was a nice, easy way for us to think about what's happening. So hopefully it helps you a little bit in thinking about all of these advances happening in hearing healthcare. And thank you for your time.
Thanks, Brent. Hope next time I can just be replaced by AI. AI can introduce the next speaker instead, and I can be an audience enjoying my time. Okay, we're still wiring up. Great. So I get to tell you a little bit about Jorge before he comes on stage. So Jorge is the head of signal processing department at NAL. And he's had several years of research and development experience working in the industry in algorithm development for hearing aids and assistive listening technologies. At NAL, Jorge heads the Department of Signal Processing and the Technology Research area, overseeing the research development of hearing-related technologies and different innovation at NAL. So I see you're ready. Come on stage.
Okay, first, thank you. Can everyone hear me? Okay, perfect. So this is a tough gig. I mean, after hearing Andrew and Brent talking about the insights of the hearing health in the world and the current cutting edge technology that is driving our future in hearing healthcare, is I thought very carefully about what to talk about today in terms of what we're doing now. But I will try to firstly start by summarizing a little bit from my very own eyes how I see technology of the future as well. So let me start by talking about a little bit about the challenges and opportunities, some of the drivers for us to move into the future of hearing healthcare. So one of the potential drivers I see is the fact that we have insufficient resources for the future. And the reason for that is because we certainly have an aging population. So we are living longer, and we are increasingly asking for more services. And that is one of the primary things what we need to worry about, what the future brings in terms of hearing healthcare. The other thing is that we are recognizing that hearing health extends far beyond purer-tone audiogram deficits. So we are identifying new populations with needs of hearing healthcare. And for example, those people that complain for hearing in noise problems, but they have no audiometric thresholds. So these are not only opportunities for us to address the issue in the future, but also one of the things we still need to discover new things about those populations, about the unmet needs this population actually need as we move forward. As Andrew mentioned, another driver is that we live in a world that is continually evolving with technology. So there was an amazing talk about the new cutting edge technology in terms of AI and the infrastructure that has been built around that. So obviously, we need to be up to date in the way we practice hearing healthcare, and our new professionals need to be trained in the right way to deliver these services in the future. But as Andrew mentioned, we also live, and also how Brent mentioned, we also live in a world where users are far more educated on AI technology. They are more knowledgeable on what is out there for them. You know, today, we're talking about large language models like ChatGPT. It's not surprising that all of us have been impacted in one way or another on the new technologies. It's helping us to actually live our lives. It's helping us to actually do our jobs. And it will be helping us in the future as we develop more and resolve our own lives and improve our lifestyles. So I want to do an experiment thought for you. I want you to close your eyes for 1 second and think about 2030 February morning. You wake up in the morning and all of a sudden, you know that you need to attend an issue of health, which is your hearing. You're having problems. Imagine your journey from that morning to how would you go about addressing this problem. Give you 1 second to think about it. And of course, compare that journey to what you can do today. Okay, for the sake of time, I'm going to move on. And I asked the kind of same questions to actually a large language model, to with ChatGPT. And I prompted in different ways to give me an indication of how that journey might look like. So here we go. This is a potential solution that ChatGPT generated. It's a self-service center where you can actually go into a self-service center. You might actually get a diagnosis. You might be able to be dispensed a new hearing aid. You might have many options. You might be able to discuss. You might be able to do so many different things. And that would be accessible because you will be around the corner. You don't have to travel all the way to to a hearing care center with provision, you just go down around the corner and you might be able to address your main needs. So that is one potential possibility as we're coming into the future. And of course, there will be many. But what's interesting about this is that you need to build infrastructure before you actually aim to achieve this kind of objectives. And now we actually have similar visions as to what ChatGPT has. And we are currently working on that, building the infrastructure to be able to achieve these goals. So what are we doing? We know that what you experience, what a clinician can get and understand from a patient in the clinic is not sufficient to understand the unmet need the person has. What are the drivers for this person to actually come to the clinic and have a discussion with the clinician about the hearing problems? What is critical is to understand the living experience they have. What is the problem back at home when they're trying to communicate with the parents, the children at work? What are the barriers they're trying to overcome and the reasons why they come into to seek clinical service and help? Well, and now, and led by one of the lead researchers, Nikki White, we're developing technologies to try to understand that. And we have been developing knowledge for the last 10 years to enable us to go into the real world and capture some of this information and use machine learning and artificial intelligence to try to understand the insights of the experience of the patients, the people with hearing impairments in the real world context. But more recently, we realized that this kind of technology has limitations, so we're going to the next level. And we now know that almost everyone is using wearable technologies out there. And these wearable technologies have multiple sensors that allow us to understand a little bit more than just what people can tell us. When you are in an environment, you could be stressed because you are not able to communicate. So your heart rate will change, your physiology will change. So we now have technology that may be able to capture that information and translate that into a meaningful insight for our new patients in the future. So Nikki White, again, has been for the last couple of years looking at that and developing the technology, developing the mathematics, the algorithms that we need to actually extract the right information from this newer technology as well. And of course, the next step is how do we go about utilizing all this amazing information from the clinical context? And for the several years, we've also been exploring ways to actually create meaning behind the information we are gathering today so that the clinicians in the future would be very informed. Or even the AI machine that you're going to go into the ATM and interact with will be very informed, provide you the right direction as to what you should do to address your main need. The reason why you come into that ATM and request the services you are requesting for these devices. It's technology. Another thing we're building is the tools that we'll need in the future as well. And this initiative is led by Jessica Monahan, who is the lead in our AI program at NAL. Some of the things that she's looking at is this idea of precision healthcare. How do you utilize information to provide the right diagnostics with the right precision to understand the right condition of people with hearing impairments? And of course, deep learning, machine deep learning techniques have been used, for example, to identify loss from speech in children. So this goes beyond than just understanding audiometric threshold. We're trying to understand problems, fundamental problems in communication. And from that infer some of the problems, for example, children might have in hearing in relation to the hearing functionality as well. We are leveraging a lot on big data to understand how we can improve the service we provide. And through Hearing Australia data system, we can access a lot of information, a lot of wealth, but we're just starting to tap into some of the meaningful key ingredients that will allow us to move into the future in the way we are going to deliver the future services. In addition to that, of course, we are developing technologies to support clinicians in how we deliver better services. And we're going to have some demonstrations along those lines after this presentation as well. So, but we want to go beyond that. We want to understand a lot more about the functionality of these people coming into clinics. And we want to really provide targeted solutions for them. So we need to understand the real world. We need to communicate with them, but we need to understand what's going on inside as well. So Debbie is leading that revolution within NAL. He's looking at the brain. Our brains function in certain ways, and when we communicate, our brains is telling us what the challenges are in that communications. When we actually hear conversations, we are processing that information in multiple ways, and the brain is sparking electrical activity in different ways to decode all that information. And David is looking at the details on how is that happening to allow us to understand if some people are experiencing some difficulty in communication due to some lack of information that's being accessed by the brain itself. We're also looking at whether or not people are attending certain information when they're having conversations. In some of our experiments, David has looked at whether or not people are attending a specific target in the midst of interfering noises as well. And we look at the brain activity as well to be able to detect that. And we have been quite successful in doing so. And also, more recently, we are trying to tap into this idea that our hearts, our electrophysiology activity is actually telling us something about our challenges in communication. And we got some very interesting outcomes coming up, and we are in the process of in looking into this further, to see whether or not these kind of things will be the drivers for the diagnostics, for the management, and for the additional insights into understanding our patients and to drive the future technologies that we need to overcome some of the barriers many of the clients that come into to our clinics are facing and trying to overcome as well. So to closing, maybe this is the future for our clinical centers. And if you look carefully, you can see now being part of the journey. So now it's not going to build the solution, but it's going to be part of the journey of the patients, of our clients of the future as well. And of course, we need to have the collaboration we now have with GN. We need to have the support from here in Australia to be able to build that future together. So I hope that my vision is not too challenging for all of us, but I think my team is very excited to be part of the revolution, using technologies like ChatGPT, using technologies like deep neural networks, using the infrastructure that we're building today, and leveraging the new emerging tools to apply and to solve the problems of the future, not just of today, but also as we move into the future and to address so many challenges we have coming up and probably we're experiencing today. So thank you for that. And with that, I'd like to introduce the next talker, who is Jessica Monahan. Jessica is an innovator and has got extensive knowledge in neuroscience and psychoacoustics as well. She's also very knowledgeable in machine learning, and she's using her expertise to actually create the new generation of tools and technologies and now to address some of the issues and potentially to build this kind of future we need and we're heading towards. So Jess, I leave it to you, and hopefully that would be great. Thank you very much.
Wish came true. I didn't have to introduce the next speaker.
Okay, is that, yeah. Thanks for that introduction, Jorge. So I'm going to be talking about an AI-powered app to identify hearing loss using children's speech. So we know that the earlier that children are diagnosed with hearing loss, the better their outcomes. But many children are not diagnosed until they've started school and maybe they're already struggling. So how would it have been possible to diagnose these children earlier, these children who are being fitted at 5 and 6 Well, we don't have a widespread screening after the newborn hearing screening in Australia. So currently, before school age, we're basically relying on parents to notice that their child has a hearing loss and take them to the GP. However, research has shown that parents aren't very accurate at identifying hearing loss in their children. And even in the past, even in the case of profound or severe hearing loss, parents would only be able to recognize this about 50% of the time. So if we were to try and screen children before school age, particularly for children under 4, this would be a really infeasible task. So testing young children, it requires specialist expertise and even equipment. So if we wanted to do this, we would have to come up with a new technology that would make this convenient and inexpensive. So we were inspired in our idea by the research on speech development and hearing loss. So children, the acquisition of all phonemes or speech sounds is delayed in children with hearing loss, but this is, there's a different pattern. So for instance, the vowels are less delayed than consonants, and particularly than these high frequency consonants, they're fricatives. So this is because vowels have a lot of energy and a longer duration than consonants. So for children with hearing loss, they're more exposed to these sounds, whereas with sounds like high frequency consonants, then they're not receiving that exposure, so they're not producing those sounds. So there's a particular pattern here. It's not just that all speech is delayed. So there's a different pattern, for instance, to children who have a speech delay for some other reason. And we know that AI can be used to detect patterns. So can we train AI to detect the signature of hearing loss from children's speech? And ideally, we would then be able to use this technology in an app or a smart speaker or your local hearing ATM in Jorge's vision to just test your child's speech and be able to immediately get a screening result. And it's not so far-fetched. So particularly recently, there's been a lot of research in how different health conditions can be detected in people's speech. So things like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, depression, even COVID-19 have been shown to be, you can detect them in samples of people's speech. And there's even a company, Sonder Health, which has an app where you can speak to it and it will tell you about your predicted health conditions. So we wanted to see if this was possible for hearing loss. Unfortunately, we had these speech recordings from the Lockheed study where the children had taken this speech production test when they were 3 years old. And in this test, they're shown pictures and they have to produce speech. They have to say what the object is, like elephant, girl, lighthouse. And these sessions were recorded for accuracy. And so we therefore have recordings from 39 children with normal hearing and 110 children with hearing loss. And from these recordings, we separated out the words from the children with the children from, say, the speech pathologist and their parents. And in order to automatically analyze this, we convert it first into feature vectors. So basically, this is these are just numbers that have information about the pitch and the formant, say, and the shape of the spectrum. And then we can feed that into a deep neural network, and it can learn, because we know for each of these speech samples whether it came from a child with hearing loss or with normal hearing. So it's the way it works is it produces its guess of whether the child had hearing loss or normal hearing, and then it can check whether it was right or not, and then adjust some knobs and then see whether the next attempt's better. And then gradually, with many examples of speech from children with hearing loss and normal hearing, it can learn to recognize these patterns. and produce the correct result. And actually, so by the end of the training, when it receives speech from a child it hasn't heard before, then it has 97% accuracy. And so that's sort of equally between the children with normal hearing and hearing loss. So it actually compares very favorably to traditional speech, traditional testing techniques with children in this age range. So before we went further with developing this, we wanted to check that people actually wanted this technology. So first of all, we spoke to parents and childcare centres, asking them what they thought, and basically, as a quick summary, they were very enthusiastic and they thought it would make things a lot more convenient, and that really this is something that should be done so that children are screened for hearing loss before they start school. So the next stage is app development. So we were fortunate to receive an NHMRC Ideas Grant to develop this as an app. So what we needed to collect a larger and more diverse speech database to ensure that we have high accuracy for all backgrounds and demographics. So we developed an app that allows us to collect speech samples from children in their home environments in a similar way to the speech test we saw earlier. And our goal is to collect speech from up to 1,000 children across Australia with and without hearing loss. And once we have that database, then we can train a more robust machine learning model that can then be included in an app to do a speech screening. So I'm going to give you a demo of what the app is like now, and also a view of what it might look like once we've integrated that machine learning model. So Nikki Chong-White developed the actual app, but I had to take responsibility for the UI in our imagined version. So there's no sound.
What's
Is
this?
the sound online? Okay, maybe. That mean it's muted. Okay, yeah. Yes, good. Okay, so it says, what's this? And it shows the
Teddy bear.
the child a picture, and then they respond.
What's this?
And that continues for a while, and every 5 pictures they get a rewarding image, which they find very entertaining. And then at the end, we then have this part where we just record them playing with their parents. So ideally, you wouldn't have to get them to do a task like naming pictures. You would just record passive speech. So we want to see if it's possible to detect the hearing loss just from that speech. And then in the future, we would go to this stage where it would analyze the speech either on the device or in the cloud, and then provide a screening result. So obviously we would think a lot about how we would present those results and what the next steps would be, but just to give you an idea of how it would work. So next steps for us are that we've seen that using speech and AI is a promising approach to screen young children for hearing loss. And we're aiming to release the speech collection app early next year. So we'd love to hear from anyone who works with children with hearing loss or parents who have children in this age range, and there's a QR code there. So if you want to go there, you can fill in your details and we can get in touch and you can help us. So thanks to the rest of the team, so it's a large team, and thanks to our funders.
Hey, thank you so much, Jess. I feel like I've learnt so much just by listening in the past hour, even though I've heard everyone speak before several times, but once you put all of them together, you really start to see a picture. Great. Okay, so our next speaker before the panel discussion is Lisa McBride. Lisa is the product and audiology manager for GN Hearing Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, and Malaysia. Over her 7 years at GN, she has held a number of training commercial roles and is now responsible for leading the product strategy, portfolio management, technical expertise, and supporting the clinical research across the cluster. So welcome, Lisa.
Everyone hear me okay? Cool, it's working. Great. So hope you are all enjoying the presentation as much as I am. I'm taking it all in as well with you. I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to take us on a slightly different direction. We've been very focused on AI so far today, and that is definitely one of the most exciting things in our industry at the minute. But I want to look at something also hopefully just as exciting for you. When we think about connectivity, things have changed a lot and we're relying on connectivity more than ever before, not just in the hearing aid industry, but even in what we're doing right now. Think about the fact we've got people in the room here, got people online. Like, this is unbelievable, the setup that we're able to do nowadays. But we do need to think about accessibility as part of that in everyday life now. So I want you to have a listen to this audio recording and see if it sounds familiar. Hopefully this works.
Thank you for waiting, ladies and gentlemen. We've invited first class, now we're inviting the executive platinum, emerald, sapphire, and ruby if those boards are written on your boarding card.
So I don't know about you guys, but I know it wasn't that loud out in the room, but I have no idea what flight number that was, what gate we were being called to, any of the information, and I'm sure that sounds quite familiar to you for sometimes you've been in an airport yourselves. And think about it, that it's challenging for those of us that don't have a hearing impairment, but imagine then if you've got a hearing loss on top of that, it's going to make it extra challenging. And so it is something that is something we need to consider in those places like an airport, in a train station, any public space where we're factoring in a distance, even this room today, for those of you sitting right at the very back. We need to think about that with kind of any reverberation, and particularly in an airport or train station. We've also got the background noise as well too going on that's all competing. So this is where we have already been using connectivity quite a lot in this space. And it kind of all started with the likes of telecoil. For example, even in this venue today, there's an infrared system set up. So I want to take you first of all in a bit of a history lesson of the connectivity evolution and journey to start with before we start looking at the future. So, like I said, everything kind of started with telecoil and FM, those more analog systems have been around for longer than we've all been in the industry. But then there was a bit of a jump when classic Bluetooth first sort of hit the world, not just our industry. And that was the first kind of like the digital revolution there. And think about it now, you've probably all got some form of Bluetooth enabled device on you right now. Either your smartphone, computers, you may at home have a Bluetooth speaker that you use to dance around your kitchen while you're cooking dinner. It's just part of our everyday life now. It's just so ingrained in technology. And so obviously then as hearing aid manufacturers, we got a bit excited about this and thought, oh my goodness, how can we incorporate this in the technology? But it's something that wasn't an instant fit. We had to factor in battery drain, large antennas that we need to connect it. So we had to be a bit creative as an industry. So that's where we started creating more proprietary protocols. It started off with the likes of 2.4 gigahertz that were used to connect hearing devices directly to wireless accessories without the need for an extra neck loop. But then this evolved further to the likes of made for iPhone connectivity. Then we brought Android phone users into the mix as well with the ASHA protocol. But all of these were ways that us as an industry had to really adapt to make sure that we could still provide clients with the benefits of all these technologies, but in a way that works with hearing aid technology at the same time. So based on this then, a group of hearing aid manufacturers got together and they approached Bluetooth SIG with the fact that we kind of need something better as an industry to help open up accessibility a bit further. Because when you look at the combination of what we're using as an industry at the minute, there are so many different types of connectivity all operating at once. They don't interact with each other, and none of them are an absolutely perfect solution. You know, for example, we need a different approach for an iPhone versus an Android phone. For the likes of telecoil, we need quite a big installation in the building. It can be quite expensive, and it's something we need to be factored in public spaces. What if there was something that was kind of like a one-size-fits-all approach that would help everyone, that wouldn't have to be tailored for our industry, that could be more of a standard that could be used all around? So that's what the group of hearing aid manufacturers went to Bluetooth to pretty much ask for. And they worked over the years, and they've actually come up with a whole new Bluetooth standard called Bluetooth LE Audio. And that enables a very cool technology called Auracast. And if this is the first time you've heard the term Auracast, you're going to be hearing it a lot, not just in our industry, but out kind of personally in commercial electronics and everything as well. So it's quite an interesting one that we can get a first look at, that your friends and family probably talking about down the track. So it's something that is going to be in everything. It's going to be in hearing aid technology, cochlear implants, headphones, earbuds, gaming equipment, TVs, laptops. It's going to be across the board. So they're actually predicting that 3 billion Bluetooth LE audio devices will be shipped annually by 2027. This is going to be the standard eventually. Think about, again, all those devices that you already have that are enabled with Bluetooth Classic, which is standard Bluetooth. That's going to be overridden by Bluetooth LE audio. And so this is going to be relevant for our clients wearing hearing devices. It's going to open up a lot of accessibility for them, but it's also something that might be useful for those maybe looking into the OTC space, like thinking going back to what Brent was saying earlier, or people just using just normal earbuds or headphones. This is going to be really a universal protocol across the board. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Lisa, you keep talking about how it's going to be in everything, but what actually is the benefit of having it in everything? So there's a few different benefits to Bluetooth LE audio. Firstly, much better sound quality compared to what we currently get with Bluetooth. With the classic version, it uses a new codec, which is lower latencies, and it just means we get a brilliant sound. And it's, for anyone who has had listened to it yet, you probably agree with me, it sounds great. But it does all this with a really low battery drain, which is the really important thing for us in the hearing aid industry, to make sure that we get the long-lasting battery life in devices. Next is multi-stream. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you've tried to connect, say, 2 sets of headphones to one phone, or maybe 2 headphones because you're trying to do a Teams call with someone sitting beside you to the one laptop, or tried to have 2 phones connected to your headset at the same time. It's not that easy to do with a current Bluetooth system, but with Bluetooth LE audio, it's going to open up more possibilities with multi-stream. But at a whole other level from that, kind of building it up to a full broadcasting capability is what Auracast is. So Auracast is using a multi-stream capability, but on a public level. So we could be using that to stream to every single one of you guys in this room today, rather than just connecting one pair of headphones or hearing aids to one laptop. Hope that's making sense. So it's going to enable us to have lots and lots of different devices connected all at once, all streaming at the same time. But then in this Auracast broadcast capability, this is going to be really useful in public spaces in particular. So I want to take you through a bit of a scenario. I haven't got a huge amount of time, so I will try to get through it quickly for you. So think about you're taking a family holiday. So you got to the airport and you've brought one laptop with you and you want to watch a movie on Netflix while you're waiting for the flight. So the flight's delayed as well. And you could actually connect all the devices to the one laptop at the same time and stream the audio together and all enjoy the movie together, rather than having to watch from separate devices. Then say you're worried you're going to miss your gate. So you actually link into an Auracast transmitter that's at the gate that your flight's going to go out of, or say you can connect it to your flight number. There's different possibilities of how this could look once it's rolled out. but then you could be enjoying your movie, but then you get the notification that, oh, your flight's ready to board. So you're not having to constantly look at the tiny little boards and squint to see if there's been any changes to your flight. Say then you take a break from watching the movie and you decide to go into the airport bar, and there's a couple of different screens showing different sports games on TV at once. You might say, oh, I want to watch that AFL game that happens to be on while I'm waiting for my flight. You could link into that Bluetooth LE audio enabled TV and stream the audio from that TV directly into your devices. And this is open again to everyone. So again, it's something that's not limited to hearing aids, but it's going to be a really big benefit to those users. But say in this room right now, we could have a room filled with people with Bluetooth LE audio enabled hearing aids, earbuds, cochlear implants, anything. And you could all be hearing me like I was sitting in the seat right beside you. And it's something that we do need to do a little bit of work on to make sure it is available for those clients to use in public spaces. But they're predicting that 2.5 million locations will offer Auracast globally by 2030. So there will be a bit of a crossover between it and telecoil as the new technology starts to roll out. It's going to be very, very easy to connect as well, which is what we want when we're talking about accessibility. There's different options of how it could potentially connect. It may be very similar to a Wi-Fi connection, where you just click on it like connecting to the Wi-Fi in the airport. It could also be behind a password to secure it, like some Wi-Fi connections. It could be through, say, scanning a QR code that's on the wall at the gate that you're waiting for your flight at. Or it could be by pressing a physical button on the device to connect it. But what's the best thing about this all is that, again, this is a new Bluetooth standard. Bluetooth LE audio, while designed taking into account the hearing industry, it's designed for everyone. But we get to be at the forefront of it. Our clients get to have the benefit of this ahead of anyone else. So it's a really exciting space for us as an industry, because we know of all these extra accessibility benefits that clients are going to get. And we really are enjoying the next generation when it comes to connectivity. So definitely watch this space. There's definitely a lot more to come in this area. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. We are now entering the panel discussion. So if I can invite the panel discussion panelists up. The chairs are coming. Sorry. I have never seen a panel discussion standing. All right. Well, I want to sit, but now that we're all standing, let's all stand. Thank you. So, okay, let's go. So, online attendees, this is the time to start typing your questions, and in-person attendees, if you do have a question, please raise your hand, and our mic runner will give you a microphone. And starting off, I would like to reflect on what we just heard, which is we've heard from Andrew from the technology side. We've heard a little bit about how in the clinics and from our consumers, we can start thinking about how these new innovation could apply in the practice and the framework to think about that for Brent. And also Jorge mentioned something interesting, which is the role of different people. So for example, the role of an audiologist, the clinician in this sense, and also the client in providing the unmet needs, and giving us information and working with the manufacturers and different people in our hearing healthcare system to really bring the innovation to life. So my question is, how can we, everyone in this room who may be a clinician, who may be from the head office at GN or Hearing Australia, who may also be online from a manufacturer or even private practice, private smaller manufacturers or startups. How can we all try to help to bring new AI solutions to the market to really deliver that impact faster?
Well, okay, so I'll pick it up. It's working. Yeah. First of all, no. One is just to embrace technology. I've been in this field before. Every time something new comes along, everyone's scared that they get replaced by it. When I first joined the field, they able to program a hearing aid with the computer. But oh my God, I don't need my screwdriver anymore. Change the game setting to the hearing aid. I'm done before. But you know, it's just AI or clinician perspective is going to use hopefully software. But think about the spectrum of things. It's also going to be a tool for the consumer in different fields. So it'll be a great embrace it. But we need for people to front line to find the need. I'll give you an example. I know there's a clinician audiologist in Australia today that is using ChatGPT to monitor his conversation with clients and automatically create Facebook and moving from that conversation. So that's the leading edge use of technology. Great, figure out how to make it happen.
Just on that note, Amazon actually has a tool for doctors and nurses for that case studies to help them out in the busy atmosphere and at least get a draft put together and then they just review it. So I think that's a great opportunity. I don't, like obviously we're in research, so we see sometimes problems in other places. Like for me, my worry would be the regulatory space, like how what are some of the regulations that'll stop us from maybe being very coming out with very personalized fit, because you have to be careful with customer data and stuff like that. Who will, does the patient need manufacturer? So there's going to be a lot of questions like that just to figure that out. But in terms of replacement, I agree with you. I mean, as an engineer, when we went from analog to digital, I worry as an analog engineer, and make sure I learn how to be a digital engineer. But it's usually, you just have to keep on learning, right? And keep on adjusting. So at some point, I actually think machine learning will empower you to do more as a clinician, because you'll be able to understand more about your patient and maybe apply tools like, you guys are working on an EMA tool. And how can we learn if our solution and our treatment is actually working? Imagine getting real-time data that says, Mrs. Jones is doing really well, and here's some metrics just following her for her first week, and just having, let's say, an assistant out in the field for you, monitoring and supporting. So.
Yeah, so thinking about this, the question is, how do you overcome the barriers against adopting new technology? And the way I actually think about it in terms of the engineering work we do is look around you and think about the technology that is out there that you rely on. And sometimes it's life dependent, and you're already using it, and you actually are part of it. So you fly from the US to Australia and you're on an airplane. There's a lot of AI technology that's controlling that flight. So your life is actually dependent on that. It's making decisions. And the pilot's no longer in charge, by the way. You are relying on that technology to get you from point A to point B. So that's as life depending as you get in life. And So the decisions we need to make about taking care of people with problems, there are many things where are not as critical as that. And I think we all need to experiment with what technology can do. I think that's the only way you're going to overcome that barrier. Because there are worse things out there, but there are more benefits to gain from the ability to actually see a little bit ahead and try to experiment and exploit technology that you have available, like the ChatGPTs.
Thanks, everyone. Oh, Beck does have a question, but as we get the mic to Beck, there is a question online. So reflecting on the idea of multiple sensors in future hearing devices, does the panel feel that private insurance companies will pay for this? So the question proposes feeling is that they won't, and that our clients will be paying more out of pocket because of that introduction. And so in today's economic climate, that's a tough ask. So does the panel think inclusion of additional sensors is commercially feasible? Idea. We're all looking at you, Andrew.
Well, there's other people here too. Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think there's opportunities. So you have real estate here. You have a hearing instrument. You're already doing some stuff, and there's some additional real estate to collect more data. And so there's always opportunities that are arising that we hear about that could, you know, whether it's going to an insurance company or whether it's a third party. You know, just an example, the other day, someone came in and they build products for sleep disorders, but they said, well, how we analyze and how we administer the sleep disorder is we have to have a microphone to analyze it, and then we need some sound to break the loop, and we want to have some sort of listening device that someone sleeps in, right? And so, you know, whether we need additional sensors or the sensors that we already have are being used for other purposes, there's a lot of opportunities. If it's going to be used for an insurance company to justify something or collect more data, yeah, I think that comes down to who owns the data, what's the regulations with this data. I think there's a lot of uncertainty in that space that it'll be curious to see where it goes.
It varies by country. Is this not working? It varies by, yeah, there you go. It varies by country. Here in Australia, the government pays for most hearing aids. For anyone who needs hearing help in the US, it does not. And it used to be it was all out of pocket. Now some health insurance companies are providing hearing aids, but that's because they want to compete. You know, take our health insurance because we'll give you hearing aids and they won't.
Yeah.
So if you come up with a hearing aid that maybe can identify Alzheimer's, it's really hard to prove the health economics of something to get governments to pay and to get CMS in the US to cover it through Medicare. But it could be something that health insurance companies would use to make themselves look more attractive. That being said, in my opinion is everything that's not related to helping your hearing, but gets added for other things like, you know, detecting fall detection or Alzheimer's or something like that. I think the consumer is going to have to ask, do I want this added feature in my hearing aid? Will it help me? If I'm buying hearing aids for my parent, I probably want all of that because I really care about their health care. So I'll pay the extra money. Government probably won't because, you know, it's not on target. It's really tricky to get them to support it.
I just like to add, you know, that we are starting to see evidence that all these biosensors are telling us a lot about our health in general, and all the things are interconnected. And I think there's a lot of value. And eventually, once we develop the evidence, as we do the research, that evidence will show the value of utilizing this data to actually make sure that our population is actually being treated and being looked after in the right way, and the limited resources we have and going in the right place. So this is where I guess we need to work more in that space, but that's where the greatest value for utilizing those sensors will come from.
Just one last thing to add, make sure I turn it on. At the end of the day, we make hearing aids. So, you know, that's the number one priority. So we always entice extra areas, but that's outside of our expertise. I think people want to buy a hearing aid, they want a hearing aid that works. And that's our number one goal. I think some of these other opportunities are great, but you know, we just have to realize that's not our field either. So.
So much. Oh, it is working. Great. Beck.
Thank you. I was just thinking about how hearing research has sort of ticked along at a standard pace because there's a finite number of people working in hearing research around the world. But in the last short period of time, there's been a huge evolution in the machine learning and in the AI space, and more than ever, hearing researchers are drawing inspiration and taking on research from other areas. And so hearing research is taking this exponential growth. And so I was wondering, as AI innovation is moving so fast, how do you as research leaders make the decisions as to which AI-driven ideas to pursue and which ones to sort of car park and wait and see just in case they become obsolete tomorrow because someone else outside of hearing develops something that makes that obsolete or solves that problem for us faster than we can ourselves? How do you make those decisions as which ideas to pursue and which ones to wait and see?
Well, that's NAL's secret in how we decide what projects to greenlight or not. But, you know, as you know, we focus on impact, you know, and feasibility and, you know, time to get it out there. And does anyone want it? So, you know, Jess talked about, she had this great technology, but then she paused and said, okay, does anyone actually want this voice detection of hearing loss for kids? And got the answer yes. So there's a lot of sort of, at least for me, a lot of checks you have to hit in order to say yes to any project. And it's going to be the same for AI projects or as well. I don't know, is that what you're asking? Yeah.
For my team, and I guess for part of GN, we have something called an NABC, which came out of Stanford, which is based on need, approach, benefit, and competition. And usually when we start looking at ideas, we have people draft out an NABC, and that is then reviewed by a strategic committee that looks at where our priorities are and how does that fit in. So if there's a lot of cool ideas, but at the end of the day, if you know there isn't a need, you have an approach but no need and no benefit, well, that's an easy win. But if you actually do have an NABC completely through, you can maybe look at competition and say, well, you know, there's 3 other companies really actively involved in this. Do we want to take the chance of not being there? Or the other way is there's no competition there. Could we be a differentiator, right? And then look at it. So we have a process to try to go through that, and not to say that we have a glass ball to predict how we're great, and we still have to sell it to the company, even if, you know, because we have to ask for money to fund it. But that's a good starting point. And then at least we have the start of a business case for them to think about with an NABC.
I mean, you know, Brang and I see guidance from Brang on how we do this, but we do have a secret sauce now. We look at the main need, we look at technology and what problems can resolve. We move into very quickly accelerate development so that we fail quickly before we commit ourselves to the technology. So there's a lot of process and engaging before we actually commit ourselves to full development. And there are so many different options to take from. And it's always a challenge for the researchers to look for the right option that will not only be a viable solution for the future, but it's something that people can access and use when it's actually being produced as well. So this is always a big challenge for any research organization.
Yeah.
I can just add, you reminded me of a story from back when I first started my career at Resound. And as a company, we chose not to get into digital because we thought it was too soon, that we were a long way from digital chips coming out. And then within 6 months, Oticon and Widex came out with digital hearing aids, and we panicked and scrambled for 2.5 years to come out with what turned out to be an amazing hearing aid, but we were caught off guard. And it makes me think there's and that's a risk tolerance, like, because it takes a lot of investment. It would have taken hundreds of millions of dollars for us to invest into digital. We chose not to, and that turned out to be the wrong decision. And so there's got to be a risk. If someone says, hey, what about a neural network dedicated chip in a hearing aid? And you know, someone goes, well, that's too costly. That's not going to happen. And then you risk the chance that a competitor comes out with it and eats your lunch.
It's a good point. speaking about stories, I remember the first time I came up with this crazy idea that we should connect the hearing aid to a cell phone, and someone said, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. So sometimes, you know, the mindset isn't right, you know, for certain ideas, and you just have to have patience and start setting seeds for them to grow. And I think as an innovator, one of your top jobs is actually to really look ahead and realize this probably isn't palatable for the business people to accept because they don't understand it and it has a high cost. So what can you do to create that knowledge bridge so they see what you see, you know? And that's a real important. I didn't know that at the time. Now I know.
Yeah, great answers. There's no one size fits all, but there are frameworks that can guide us along that journey. Did you know that Chatty G does a really good NABC plan? If I iterate it twice, I can get a pretty good proposal to digest by a human. Any other? Yes, Porig, can we get the microphone to the front, please?
Thank you. Andrew, I was just thinking about the talk that you gave and in my mind, and I guess it's to all the panel, that we still have relatively small numbers of ways to interact with hearing technology. So, you know, buttons, maybe in the future, touch sensors, haptic sensors, but largely it feels at the moment we're either going for buttons or we're getting them to look at their phone. And it felt like a lot of what we're talking about is technology that more and more needs to help the user potentially make decisions. Some of it might be intelligent agents that make the decisions for us, but I was minded by what you presented, which was sort of you get the technology to sort of empower the person to help that. So I wondered whether the panel could comment on, you know, what are the sort of the future, or how should we be thinking about how we enable users to be part of that decision-making process? You know, are we doing enough to look at the sort of human device interaction? What are the ways that we could be including the person as part of the decision loop when we have all this advanced technology? You know, is the only option that the smartphone or the hearing aid makes all the decisions? Or, you know, how do we actually include the user in that? What's the sort of future of interacting with this technology? And are there sort of things already coming on about how we might do that in the future?
Yeah, no, that's a really fascinating question. So I'll give you two examples. One was the Wii controller, and that reached a lot of people who never game and are older because they said it just made sense. and they picked it up and it was just intuitive, you know. So that gives you some insight on when we take a look at the mouse and what we do with the mouse. You know, that was designed by an engineer, right? Because that's not very intuitive. And you look at different mice that they build and people learn and train themselves, and it's great, you know, but it isn't very intuitive. You actually, some of these things you actually have to learn a keyboard to get your knowledge into the computer. You have to learn how to type, right? Versus could I just talk and just would it be able to dictate? A second thing was an example when I was waiting at NAL and we were like typing in to get through the entrance, and we couldn't get in. Then someone got out and we snuck in, right? So we were sitting there waiting, you know, for people at NAL, and we were watching all these people trying to get out of NAL, and there's an arrow pointing this way, and they're all turning off the lights. They go and follow the arrow, turn off the lights, right? I mean, they just have to walk out that door, right? And now they have to figure out how. And there's a button over here. There's a fire extinguisher. There's an arrow that points to another button over there. And I would say, I don't know, I had colleagues there. It was about 50% of the people were turning off the lights, and 50% of the people were like, you know, or 25 were, what the heck is going on here? But it's just an example of how important HCI is. Like at the end of the day, just like that exoskeleton, you don't want to think about having to move your legs in order to move this machine to move and sync. You should just move, right? And so a hearing instrument should never, like, we shouldn't actually have to push buttons. We do because we don't have any other creative way to get that data in. So I think the innovation that's coming up will look at extremely creative HCI methodologies. I think there's a lot of, you know, like we're investing a lot in that space, and there's a lot of other companies that are, you know, looking at it too. So I think there's going to be great breakthroughs, and that's going to really help kind of the overall AI ecosystem, because we're just finding more ways of creatively getting data and creating a feedback loop for this smart system, you know, from the user to the machine.
You make me think of one way to overcome the, you know, the relying on the push button so much is if you're used to something for so long, you can't see another way. And so design thinking is all about bringing in naive observers and asking why. Why do you have to do it that way? Why can't you do it a different way? And your question makes me think, we've been having this conversation about clinical practice, audiological practice. We've been doing things the same way in hearing healthcare for 30 plus years. Hasn't changed. But you could probably ask why. Why do we still do that? Just like why would you still do a push button? Isn't there a better way? Isn't there a more natural way that involves the human in it in a unique way? I guarantee there is, but you almost need a naive person to come in and go, what the hell are you doing? Why do you do it that way? Why don't you do it this way instead?
Actually, today we had a participant workshop where people with perceived hearing difficulties came in, and we were discussing what does that mean, what does that look like, and a few of the participants on my table, at least, asked me, okay, why do I need to press all these buttons to change the why can't it just do it for me? The technology is so smart right now, and I keep hearing it from different places. Someone was saying how a blind person can now see through a tooth implant with a video camera and be able to see, and there's an implant through the nerve, so then you have that perception in your brain through the tooth. And so I was like, whoa. So the participants were asking questions like, okay, why do I need to manually press the buttons? Why does this thing need to be in my ear? Why can't it just connect me to the world through Wi-Fi, like Wi-Fi does? Well, we can kind of do that. But why do I need to put two devices in my ears? Why can't it be just something in my pocket that allows me to hear better and access and communicate better? And so I think in terms of engaging with our clients, our participants, getting that fresh perspective, you get all these crazy ideas from naive listeners, but they are people who are living this unmet need every day, and they're telling you, here are some, out of the box things that we would go, nah, that would never, what? You laugh now, but they would tell you things that you're like, okay, let's actually consider that. Let's see how that could work. So it's important to have that engagement. Okay.
I just say that maybe one day we will be able to have a personalized hearing aids in a way that they will be totally transparent to anything they need to do. I'm not sure we're there yet. And although we are having some new discoveries on how we can utilize the brain activity to try to determine what people are thinking, what they're listening to, we look at behavior, we can kind of predict what the intent of the person is. We look at communication, which is machine learning, and we can try to understand what the communication is all about, whether they have different feelings for it, whether they engage, the head turning, and so on. So there are many tools that we are yet to integrate together to give us a full understanding, to anticipate the behavior and what people want to hear in complex listening situations. Once we get there, maybe we can start thinking about eliminating some of these necessary tools to overcome the issue. And then we can have intelligent agents to actually take over control. And they are no longer going to be the co-pilots that we are used to today.
Okay, so with the interest of time, I'll ask one last question for each of the panelists to answer. If someone is going to open a new hearing clinic in the next 12 months, okay, what would you advise them to do to make sure that their clinic is future-proof? Give you a bit of time to think about it. So if you're going to open a new clinic in the next 12 months, what would your advice to them be to allow them to be more future-proof?
Don't install Windows 98.
Okay. First of all, to be future-proof means you must be willing to change and continually change. I think in any field, that's the only way you can stay competitive over the next decade. Is every couple of years you're going to have to change how you do things. Everyone, not just our field, every field. But if I were to quit my job and open a clinic, which would be quite interesting to do, I bet I could do a really good job. I would just look at what is everyone else not doing, the kind of stuff that we talked about today, which is hard to change. It's hard to get people to change what they do. If you're starting new, it's easy to start fresh. So I would just say, I'm going to do things differently. I'm going to question why, and I'm going to, take some advice from what you heard today and figure out how to incorporate that and differentiate myself and continue to evolve as technology changes.
To be prepared to take risk as well. That's the biggest challenge.
Yeah, not to end on a joke. Yeah, it's a good question, but I think you just have to be willing to adopt really quickly with how things are changing, especially now. If a new technology comes out that gets a better fit in a quicker time frame, don't always worry about whether this takes away jobs. Look at how it optimizes your time to do more for your patient. I think you're going to see a ton of tools to save time for you and to do a lot of work for you that you don't have to do. And you have to just come to the mindset that just because you do work and you feel good that you did that work doesn't mean that's the best for your patient. There's some work that is better maybe for the machine to do, and collect the data while you can do something else that you're better at doing for the patient that the machine can't do. And so it's just that open mindset, I think, is probably your best prep tool.
Thank you so much. And with that, I would like to invite everyone to thank our panelists today once again. Okay, so before we let everyone enjoy the the canapé and drinks, and our online attendees to do that whenever you want to, I would like to thank all of our presenters today, and Jess, and Lisa, who were up here sharing their wisdom, sharing their approaches with everyone. And I hope that you've all taken something away today and are thinking deeply about the future of audiology. And also I would like to thank my events team who's made today possible. So the people sitting at the back there in the control station, as well as the GN, part of our staff who are part of our events team as well. Without you, today would not run so smoothly, and without you, we wouldn't have any of the drinks and any of this happening. So you have them to thank. Okay, so I won't stand in the way of you and food anymore. So with that, thank you everybody for coming to today's event, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening. We'll say bye to the online attendees right now, and then we have something special for the internal staff members. So do tune in if you are an internal staff member into the second link. Very shortly, we will have a 5-minute break right now before we start the next section.